Hi, my name is Ross Smith, and I have an education project called The Natural Philosopher, a Curriculum for Ecological Intelligence. So one thing we're going to be doing on the show regularly is featuring a particular piece of art and hopefully talking about the evolution of it, because that's what's really helpful, I think, for people is seeing the process, how people work their way through ideas. And so this is about a piece of art I made called Rameau's Rite. And Jean-Philippe Rameau was a French music theorist, and I want to say it was either the 15th or 16th century. And his focus was on chords, on triads. And his argument was that chords and triads should be the foundation of music theory as opposed to scales, which is the way it's usually put together. So I happened to be watching a documentary about music on the web one morning, and this image flashed up on the screen. And what we have is a representation of the note C inside of a hexagon, and then all 6 of the major and minor triads that C occurs in are listed around it. So C major to start, okay, and you notice that whoever drew this diagram indicated C minor on the opposite side. We have F major, and then on the opposite side we have F minor. Again, these are chords that the note C shows up in. And then we have A flat major and A minor also. So one of the things that I noticed first of all was that he was treating majors and minors as opposites. And there's some argument for that linguistically, but there's no argument for it musically. There's not really such a thing as a musical opposite, as far as I can tell, or a musical paradox or contradiction. And we'll talk about that at some point. So I was looking at this and I'm going, I'll bet if I changed the relation of these different chords around that C note, the thing might just tile. And that's what it did. So here's my original working copy of Rameau's Rite. You can see I signed it on 9/2/09. So here's that C we were looking at before. And so what I ended up with was landing the major and the minor chords beside each other, C major on those 2 faces of the hexagon. And you can also see I rotated the hexagon so that the point is up instead of the flat as it had been. And then on the bottom I have the F major and F minor chords. And on either side I have the A flat major and the A minor chords for C. So then I applied the relationship of the fifth and started building the matrix out in this direction and filling in what chords seemed to want to go. And as I say, this big patterning evolved out of that. Okay, go. We're back having another look at Rameau's Rite to finish up a slot that we shot about 3 weeks ago. So the story centers around the note C, as you'll recall, in this hexagonal pattern. And I decided, okay, let's apply the natural philosopher epistemography to this thing. We choose a point of reference, which is C, and then we start applying a relation to that recursively and start building a structure out. So the relationship that I chose was what's referred to as a circle of fifths, or the relationship of the fifth more precisely, actually, in this context. So I placed the note C there, and the next one I placed up was G, and I played around with different configurations of the triads around C and ended up with this pattern of C minor on the left hand side and C major on the right hand side. And this both of these chords contain the note G, I have then G minor and G major here. Both of those contain the note D, which is a fifth up from G. So that part of the pattern started to come together. But then when I tried to build it out, I didn't quite know what to do, and started experimenting with different things. And the pattern that finally popped out was that on either side of C, I would have A flat major on this side, A minor on this side, and then the major minor chord pair together would then carry me on to the next note in the lateral pattern. Which, okay, I started with C, and I ended up with C sharp down the road here, and I'm like, oh my goodness, I wonder if I'm going to have the chromatic scale as I keep going. So D flat went to D, and sure enough, let's switch over to this F sharp pattern. Why don't we, Richard? So here we've jumped to a different point in the pattern. Still, the overall patterns apply here. And what I discovered, as I mentioned a moment ago, was that the chromatic scale popped out in the horizontal direction as I applied this pattern. Okay, not only that, but I got another representation of the chromatic scale going along that angle there. Something that really surprised me was the whole tone scale then popping out on this axis here, and the major third minor sixth pattern that way, the major sixth minor third pattern that way. And I'll tell you what, I was pretty thrilled about that, I must say. So let's rotate this thing on around and look at another chunk of it. So I want to remind everybody that notes, the big letters here, are a different logical level, different logical type than the chord indications that are around them. So we're looking at a 2 logical level structure here, minimal so far actually. So I decided to see how scale notes and scale chords might be arranged around any given note in the pattern. So I decided to look at the note D and the keys of D major and D minor. And what I found out was that the D major scale crawls around this way, the D minor scale crawls around this way, and then what else? It was something. Okay, right. So here's the first chord of the D major scale, which is a D major. The second, E minor, is here. The third, which is G flat minor, is here. The fourth, which is G major, is here. The fifth, which is A major, is there. The sixth, which is B minor, is here. And then was there another one? No, and then we're back to the 1. And, the 7's got to be in there somewhere. Yeah, there's the 7, D flat minor up there. So all 7 of the chords of D major show up on this side. All 7 of the chords of D minor show up on that side. And you see they're kind of offset, which is interesting. So really fun pattern stuff just pops out all over with this thing. So let's move on down. So the rest of the sheet is essentially different coloring experiments that I went about to see if I could see what other patterns I could see. So what I did down here was to take the color associated with each of the notes. In this case, yellow is associated with the note E in my system, and so the note E plus the 2 the E minor and E major chords, I colored those yellow as well, and then did the rest with the same pattern. B is red violet, and so F sharp is green, D is orange. So boom, I started looking at that and really enjoying that, and then I realized, it's like, oh my goodness, those hexagons could very easily be changed into what look like cubes. So we go from 2D to 3D, and that can be used to represent changes in logical type. So let's look at that part next. It's over there. So this part was really fun. So let's look at the F sharp there. So what I've done with the chords around that note are to draw those hexagons as if they are 3D cubes. Is that clear there, Richard? Can you see?
Yeah, it's pretty good.
Okay, so then it creates these, Escher-looking crosses between 3D and 2D, and and each of the walls of the cube, I color one of the note colors that comprises the triad of each chord. So you get this really interesting depth, and this would be a real good way to learn the scale. I've never really thought about it in that way, so that was the next level of experimentation, and then I started to think about harmonics, and the rest of the colorness fun here is all about representations of the harmonics, and we'll look at that next. Okay, now we're going to look at some experimental representations that I did of harmonic structure. So these concentric circles down here in the pattern those are the chords where those guys are there. And the 3 concentric circles on the outside represent the length of the strings of the notes of the chord. Okay, and then the 3 concentric circles on the inside, or maybe there's 4 of them, those represent the harmonics, the first 3 harmonics of the tonic note of the chord. And that was really fun and beautiful. You can see that, yeah, it's kind of like they mirror reflect. Do you see that? It's kind of like there's a mirror reflection around. Yeah, really fun, really fun. So let's move on up this way and have another look. Here's another representation of those same harmonics. We'll look here at the note E, and these are the chords, the triads that surround E. So what I did was I took those same concentric circles and I just shifted them around. I moved them towards in the direction of the note that they correspond to. So instead of having a semicircle of yellow, a concentric circle of yellow around that to match E, now I've got this crescent moon shape, right? This bias towards the E. And then I took the string length corresponding to the third, which was G, and biased it that way. And the fifth, which is C, it looks like, I biased it that way, so it created these really dynamic forms that I think are much more evocative of the relation between strings and their harmonics, and I just love looking at that.